Hello, Facebook. How are you guys doing today? This is Donna and Brian is there's Brian right there, and we are all
Hi.
here and say hello to everybody. So, Brian, I want you to go ahead and let's just jump right into this and get started. You go ahead and make the introductions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last show of the season. And I am really, really honored and privileged to be able to introduce both Donna Cox Baker and Martine Brennan from the Beyond Kin Project, which I believe some of you looking at your names who are popping up on our view list are familiar with. So really excited to talk about the project itself, really excited to talk about the inspiration behind it, why it's important, and why everyone should be out there supporting it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Donna, if you'd like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about how you got the idea behind the Beyond Kin project.
Great. I'd love to. Thank you so much, Brian and Danya, for bringing Martine and I on to talk about something that we value so much. I can tell you that nothing like this would have ever crossed my mind a couple of years ago when you guys were already working on these things years back. But I was just unconscious of what my larger story was in my life. And I did my DNA a couple of years ago and was completely surprised and very happy to see that I had ancestry from a place called Mali in Africa. I had to look it up on the map. I just saw your red line go through it in your intro and loved that because all of a sudden this place matters to me a great deal. That I had an ancestor from Mali, and given the timing, the amount of DNA, it was pretty clear to me that this ancestor almost certainly was an enslaved person in the United States. And so I became very curious about that. She is the person I most want to find. And I began to try to figure out how in the world would I ever find this ancestor, and started to realize just what a hard time anyone who descends from an enslaved person in the United States is going to have trying to find their ancestry. And it still, at that point, didn't occur to me I had anything to do to help anyone else with it. But I was then sitting in a class, a co-worker and I were teaching a genealogy class here at the University of Alabama in the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And most of the people in our class were retired folks who were coming back to learn, thirsty to learn folks. And we had been splitting up who was going to teach what. It was an 8-week course. And when we got to the place we needed to decide who was going to teach African American genealogy, we both just looked at each other like, do you know anything about it? No. Do you know anything about it? And Susan was the one who did the research and chose to teach that section for this group of people. And I was sitting there watching her that night as she was teaching this segment, curious like everybody else, because I had no knowledge of how to do this. But she put a slide up, and it was a picture of a bill of sale. Her 5th great-grandfather had bought a woman around the Gulf Coast. Many, many, many generations back. And it was just this, you don't have many epiphany moments in life, but that was one for me. I mean, it felt like a light hit me right in the forehead and went into my brain with the words in my head, we have the records. I mean, I suddenly realized for the first time that the descendants of the slaveholders have the records. And I knew that my ancestors, I knew that there was at least one enslaved person on my mother's side of the family. And I'm thinking, okay, what does our family have? Anything that somebody else would need? This woman who had been purchased by Susan's great, many times back grandfather, had probably, if any of her descendants are wanting to research the story of her, the bill of sale is, not necessarily where they're going to find it. So it occurred to me that we need, those of us who descend from slaveholders need to be thinking about how to help get the information where it needs to be. I was a blogger at that time, still am, but I have a blog called The Golden Egg Genealogist. And at that moment in time, the only thing that was really going through my head is this would be a good blog, post. I would post about our responsibility, what we could do. And so I was going to write about it, but I managed to, during the night, most of this is happening in one night. I went back to look at something I had looked past a million times in Ancestry.com. That thing where you're looking at a slave census. Okay, when I would search for my great great grandfather, it would bring up his name, but it'd bring up a slave census, and I'd look at it and I'd think, there's no names here. I didn't even know what I was looking at. There's no names here. So I would go on past it. And this time I went back and actually made myself process what I was looking at and realized that it was his name on the blank lines of 40 people that he owned. And that was just completely mind-boggling to me. Why did the family not know that? Why had that never been said? There was only mention of one who had gone off to the Civil War with my great-great-grandfather when he was 18 years old. And so that was a shock. And so now I'm really starting to process, because I'm thinking, I want some way to attach the group of people to my family, because I realized for the first time, I don't know my family. I mean, if you only know the 9 white people, you don't know your family. If there were 40 people living there with them, working with them, helping to raise their children, I don't know their story. So I was trying to figure out, how could I process that? Now, this was one thing I actually had some skill at a little bit, because I came from the computer industry. So my father was an engineer. So my mind is thinking, how do I document? But of course, I'm still completely illiterate about how to do African-American genealogy. So the next morning, after all night processing this in my head, my first call, and I would have called in the middle of the night if I thought it wasn't rude, was to Frazee and Taylor, who in Alabama, she is genealogy. She is African-American genealogy. She is history. She is just a fabulous person all around. And I called her to tell her what I had been processing in my mind. And she said, Donna, I've known for many, many years that the white people needed to process that they need to get the records out. And she was very excited about the fact that I was waking up to this. And so she and I became partners on what do we do next. And as I began to figure out how to document it for myself, I was doing it with the idea in mind that I'd blog about it. But then she and I were just talking about, let's put it out there for people. I mean, if we create a system that works, let's put it out there for people. Both of us are so busy. She is the busiest retired person you've ever met. And I have so many hats at my day job and my home job that we knew that whatever we did had to be sort of put out there in a way that it could sort of keep rolling on its own power, on its own steam, because we wouldn't have a lot of time to babysit it. We really didn't know what was going to happen. And we rolled out the idea to some of the people in our state that are in, prominent history positions. And we were getting all kind of a mixed bag of emotions people had about whether this was going to work, whether it was going to create trouble. And we decided, let's don't attach this to any organization. Let's just roll it out, the two of us. We don't want to kill this in committee. And so we did, and people started to latch on. And I think Brian was one of the first people to call me after we rolled it out to say how much work he had been doing and how this had helped. This system had helped. I still, by the way, the technology is the main thing I know. I am still learning like a baby about how to do African-American genealogy. I have so much to learn, but I'm glad that at least the technology side, that I was able to put that in and make some sense out of what is a very complicated thing.
Nope, absolutely, and thank you so much for that. So, I mean, basically, just listening to you talk about how it developed naturally, it just sounds as though you had a very personal kind of attachment to it. And a lot of times that's where our kind of journey for these types of things begin. So before I kind of delve into how your approach to documenting enslaved people really helped me in my research, I'm going to hand over to Martine, who's a very active volunteer with the Beyond Kin project. So if you can kind of talk about how you discovered Beyond Kin and kind of what your connection to it is.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Donna. It's really great to be here. Okay, so nearly 2 years ago, I do a lot of research on the Brennan family name because it's my family name, and I contribute to a thing called the Guild of One Name Studies, which is in the UK. And so I was here, there, and everywhere looking at different records, started coming up with Brennan's, and the designated race was coloured or black or Negro, depending on the period I was looking at. So I started thinking about this because as I was growing up, Brennan was an Irish name, and we really didn't know anything about slavery at school. We didn't learn anything. It was like something happened in the South, and there were no Irish people involved. And oh yeah, and it also happened in the Caribbean, but it's over now. This was kind of about the gist of it, okay? And so out of curiosity, I found the slave schedules and I put my family name in, and page after page after page of people with my name were coming up. And so curiosity, so I went looking, and some of them actually identify an Irish heritage. So I thought, oh my goodness, oh my God. And so I had done a DNA test with Family Tree DNA, and it wasn't helping me with figuring this out. So I knew if I did one with Ancestry, that would. So I did a test with Ancestry, and lo and behold, I had lots and lots of African American cousins, and very few, in fact, none of them do we have shared matches. So it's
And
just
actually,
one person kind of under.
and actually, two of us are here on screen. Actually, two of us are here on screen.
That is the nice part, because over the last few weeks, I have discovered that I do have a focus for my research, which is Donna and Brian, because we're cousins and I have some connection with you guys in South Carolina. So on my blog, you're going to be seeing a lot about South Carolina from now on. So that's really how I made the move, and I really can go along with Donna. I have so much to learn. Every week I'm learning. Every single week I'm learning. So anyway, I was looking at these Brennan families and I was thinking, I'd try and track them down and see, can I find their Irish roots. Now, I haven't succeeded in connecting any of them directly with a place in Ireland yet, but I keep on trucking. But of course, as I'm going along, I'm finding other people and I'm thinking, I can't just throw away this research. Somebody must be looking for this somewhere. So that's when I found Beyond Kin. And that's when I thought, great. Because the other thing is, obviously I live in Ireland, well, not obviously, but I'm from Ireland. I live in Ireland. So there's not people living down the street who are doing the same kind of research as me. So this is really great for me then to have a community of people who are also doing the same thing. So that's how I got here and found my two lovely cousins.
And so happy you could join us because we appreciate it's very late where you are at the moment. So I just wanted to kind of quickly touch on how I discovered Beyond Kin. And as Kismet or the Cosmos, whatever you want to call it, kind of works, I found out about Beyond Kin at the absolute right, perfect time that someone could find out about it. It was at the time that Donnie and I realized that we had an ancestor called Moses who had 45 children. I kind of bullied Donnie into researching him to be.
Bullied me. You bullied me. You bullied me.
to discover who this man's 45 children were, and wow. At first we did it very, very old school. We found a lot of deeds for North Carolina and South Carolina that involved Moses and the Williams family, the White Williams family, and literally deed by deed, I would write down all the enslaved people who were listed in the deed. I would make notes about them because all of a sudden I noticed their names started popping up in other deeds, in people's probates, in their estate inventories. And before I knew it, I had about 45 sheets of A4 paper, with just list after list after list of names with notations. Sally Mae, born 1805, okay, check page 23 to pick up her trail again. And I thought, there is no way I can share this research with 8 other people, because there was 8 of us who were actively involved in finding out more about Moses' story and trying to find these 45 kids. There was just no way. I thought I could digitize things, but how do I explain my notes? My handwriting is worse than a doctor's. I could just see giving the whole team just nothing but gray hairs. And I was trying to think of ways of including it in my ancestry tree, ancestry.com. Couldn't quite work it out. Just happened to do a loose Google, adding enslaved people to a family tree. There was the Beyond Kin project website. Kind of went there. I saw a little diagram, little schematic. Donna and Francine and the team did a really, really wonderful job in kind of stepping you through how to do it. And I just took it off from there. I was really excited. I phoned Donna. Oh my God, I found out this thing called the Beyond Kin Project. I sent her the link, everyone else on the team the link. And we did. That was, we actually did a Moses Williams family tree, entirely based on the Beyond Kin methodology. And that enabled us to locate 15 or 16. Well, I think at that time, it was about 10 of his children.
10. Yeah, it was 10 at that time. And then we did we're right now we're at 15 children. So we've gotten all 5 boys and 10 girls.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So,
amazing.
You know, I'm probably one of your biggest champions, cheerleaders. I will always be enthusiastic about it because it was the right tool to use, and I found it at the right time, exactly when I needed it in the course of my own research.
Well,
Right.
yeah, thank you back, because I had told you it had to go on its own power. This had to roll out in its own steam, because Francine and I didn't have the time. You guys have made that happen, and I thank you. And Donna, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just getting ready to say, you know, we always do little shout outs to our families and friends who have logged in. So I just wanted to say hello. But everything that you're saying, like Brian said, the Beyond Kin Project was just like the much needed thing at the time when we came across Moses. Because technically, yeah, Brian bullied me, but I think Moses bullied, you know, I really do. I feel like Moses bullied us into doing this particular, into getting into that. And, you know, I believe that everything happens for a reason, and more than likely it happened to bring light to your project. Not to mention our own project and you know what we're doing and what we had to do. Everything is kind of like falling into place as we do things, you know. And the Moses Williams project was just the beginning of it, and Beyond Kin had much to do with it. So with that being said,
and I was just going to also say, I also have to give kudos to the state of North Carolina for having digitized so much of its records, because we wouldn't have been able to build a tree if they hadn't, if Caswell County, and I'm going to slaughter the name of this one, but Pasquotank or Pasquanic, however you pronounce it. If they hadn't digitized the records, we would have had nothing to work with. If Edgefield County, South Carolina, hadn't digitized its records, and if the wonderful Miss Ramsey, who did the Edgefield Slave Deed book, hadn't have done that, we really wouldn't have had the data and the material that we needed to build the tree.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the message, isn't it? That these materials have got to get where people can find them. They have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say hello to our group right now. We are in the high 20s today as far as what these views are saying, but I really feel like it's more. But I want to say hello. We got Shirley, as always, Tommy, Teresa's joining us, and Teresa has a message from Martine. She says, it's nice seeing and hearing from Martine. She has helped me trace my 3rd great grandmother's Irish line. The Beyond Kin Project is brilliant, Donna. So that was for the two.
Thank you. And Martine is a miracle. She's a miracle. So.
Yes, she really is. And just also, we have people from Texas and North Carolina, our family Stephanie and Shirley. And then we also have people from Buffalo, New York, and Houston, Texas, Maryland, and our ever so faithful Karen Bertram from Denmark. This is her show.
We have a shout. We have a shout out from Michigan.
Yeah, shout out from Michigan. And is that it? I think so.
So
And
far,
No, you. Australia messaged me to say that they'll be listening in the morning.
Okay.
Our morning. Or their morning. I don't know which.
All right. So I guess we can start with questions, Brian.
So the next question I have again for Donna. Were you nervous about how descendants of slaveholders were going to be about what you were doing? That's part one. And how did you kind of prepare for any pushback that you might get?
I was absolutely expecting trouble. That group that I had polled of historians in the state, they were black and white evenly, and getting some people saying, great, do it, and some saying, oh, I don't know about this. And so even that initial thing, and then even some of my own family members worried that I was going to open a can of worms by exposing to the world our family's slaveholding history. Some very excited I was doing it, and some worried that there was going to be payback, somewhere down the road. And so I guess one of the things that was important was that moment, that epiphany moment, because sometimes things happen in your life that are so coming from somewhere else into your heart, into your mind, that you've got protection. And that was, I guess, what was happening here, that I knew this had to happen. And but I expected, quite honestly, a lot more trouble than we've seen. People have been remarkably congenial about it. And I had a few snarky emails, or a few snarky responses when I first rolled it out to genealogy networks around the country. Just a few, maybe 3 at most. Our own site has had hardly any trouble with this. I think it must be an idea whose time has come. I know that everybody's not ready for it, and that not everybody's not happy, that stories are being told that they didn't even want to know were there. But people were far more ready for it than I thought they would be. And it's been wonderful to watch it. I'm not sure what all to attribute that to. For one thing, I think it made a difference that it's Fraisine and I. She is African American. I am white. She and I both descend from both slaveholders and enslaved persons. I think somehow that diffused a lot of what people might have criticized. If it had just been her, or if it had just been me, somehow together we were able to get something, get some traction on something without anybody being able to say, "Oh, you're just trying to do this. Or you're trying to," we both sort of are this amalgam of everything that people might have been encountering. So it has not been nearly the trouble that I thought it might be.
Oh, that's
not
good
for
to
me.
hear.
Not for me. But I am hearing this.
Because I have to say, one of my unfortunate South Carolina experiences was I'd spent about a year doing intensive research on one of my Harling ancestors. Come to find out that when I eventually discovered who his enslaver was, who also happened to be his father, and for a lot of African Americans, that's going to be the double-edged sword at some point in some of our lineages. But when I reached out to my white relations on Ancestry to ask them if they had any information, and considering when Oliver Harling was born, there was a real likelihood that they might have even had a photograph of him. Yeah. I was met with I was met with some hostility, but someone was like, well, one of the responses that I got that made me the angriest was, "Oh, well, I guess the cat's out of the bag now." And I'm thinking, you've been following my journey that I've been writing about for the last year. That's a year that I could have been spending researching other people. You waited that long for me for me on my own to put those pieces of the puzzle together, and that in and of itself made me really angry. I could understood their discomfort,
Yeah.
But if you know that someone's struggling in their journey, or that you
Yep.
can speed their journey up by months, if not a year,
Yeah.
surely that should overcome any kind of hesitation, hesitation that you might have, because that's what I do. I have white genealogists, and Donna, you might want to throw that link to that article that what is that? What is that blog? The one that I shared with you guys this morning.
Reclaiming kin.
Reclaiming
Oh,
kin.
yeah.
Reclaiming kin.
I get, especially from the Holloway family, which is a huge family, very large and slaveholding family, but very complicated to research. There's a lot of wrong information in lineage books and whatever. But because the team had done such a thorough job in researching them, I get white genealogists who are also my cousins reaching out going, oh my God, now I understand why I'm not getting any DNA matches through this person because I have the wrong parents for him. These are his right parents, and as soon as I added them, I get DNA hits, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
That's
and
just,
I think, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's just me. That's just the way that I work, and I do that because that's who I am. But I also like to think that I'm paying it forward. That at some point someone will see me struggling in my journey and will return the favor.
I think you're absolutely right, and I also think that having people begin to tell these stories of our mixed heritage, as we begin to do it, just not with with complete excitement about it. Then it begins to free people up who thought, what are people going to think if they find out that I descend from slaveholders or that I descend from an enslaved person? The fears that people have, I hope, are going to begin to diminish as more and more of us take up the challenge of doing this, whether we are coming at it from African American or white side of the story. Will we begin to get comfortable with it and start to realize that if somebody is going to judge you badly because of what your ancestors did or what color your skin is, then, don't worry about it. Why would you even worry about what they think? So I think that we're going to begin to feel a loosening up of those fears, because fear is really at the base of what's going on there. That as more and more people are saying, look what I found. Here's the enslaved person I descend from. Here's the enslaver I descend from. And as we're talking about it just as naturally and as comfortably together, and nobody is beating us up about it, that maybe people will begin to loosen up and embrace the fact that we have a fascinating past together.
No, absolutely.
Ugly, but fascinating. And you don't have the story until you have the whole story.
Absolutely. And Martine, you might want to jump in on this bit. Donnie and I have spoken a lot about it, and I think we've actually we covered it a little bit on one of our shows. Tone of voice is really important. So when I'm reaching out specifically to a white DNA cousin for the very first time, and I know how we're related, or I strongly suspect I know, my tone is very open. It's very relaxed. If anything, I bend over backwards to make sure it's open, it's relaxed, it's friendly, it's inviting. And I even, even if they're still a little bit hesitant, I'm like, look, all I need is information. I don't want birthday presents from you. I don't expect you to pay my college loan. Nothing. I just want information, and that's it.
Exactly.
So, Martine,
because
I'm sure
that is
you'll
one
have...
of the fears. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time talking to people about the project because I feel that it's just the right thing to do, basically. And I try to encourage other genealogists to get involved, because they may come across something in the course of their research. And please, if you're one of those people, check out the project, make a contribution. We'd love to have it. But the response I got, particularly, I was in Liverpool last year at a conference, and the response I got was people were thrilled to know that there was something useful that they could do. And so that was the sort of overriding feeling. Then behind that was, well, what if I use the wrong words, or if I hurt somebody, or, say, particularly in the UK, they talk about this thing called political correctness, that you use the right phrases and terminology. And, you know, what I say to people is, you will make mistakes. I make mistakes. I get it wrong. But the important thing is to try, is to be open. And I find that when I'm open with people and I say, look, if I make a mistake, tell me, because I'm okay with that. I'm not going to get offended. I, you know, this is something that I have a whole load of passion for and something I really want to do. And I am teachable, I suppose, in the old phrase, you know. So this is what I say to people, that if you're willing to be teachable, you can also just contribute research and run away to you know, you don't have to stay around and make friends. And the other thing is, no matter who my matches are, not everybody becomes my friend, even though they're my genetic cousins. So I think if we kind of, I encourage people to try and lower their expectations of themselves. You know, like, don't think you're going to get it right. Don't think it's always going to be easy. No, it's not. And sometimes it's going to be sad, and sometimes it's going to be upsetting. But that's not a reason to give up in my mind. The Quakers have a wonderful phrase, and they talk about bringing the invisible into the light. And I love it, because this is what we're doing. This is the invisible history that is ours. It's our history, all of our history. Nobody is exempt from this. It's all our history.
Yeah.
And we're just bringing it into the light. And, you know, when you bring things into the light, sometimes you drop things, sometimes you break things, sometimes you just position it beautifully. No, but if you don't try, nothing gets into the light. So I try to really encourage people, you know, with that.
Well, you actually raise a really good point. It's because a lot of the times people who do have the answers come from a different generation than ours. So for me, I'm thinking about a white roan cousin that I met a few years ago. And when I first met him, he was in his late 70s. He was in his late 70s. He lives way in the depths of the Appalachian Mountains. So, you know, he's a rural, you know, old Southern boy. And he was kind of nervous speaking to me at first because he's like, I'm the age that I am. How Black people in America describe themselves has changed so radically over the decades. I'm afraid I'm going to say basically what you were saying, Martine. I'm afraid I'm going to say something that's going to basically upset you. And I'm like, well, so long as you don't drop the N-bomb, I'm kind of cool with anything else. So it turns out he was really nervous about using the word Negro. And I'm like, look, you're the age that you are. You come from the part of the states that you do, and I know that you don't mean me personally any disrespect. So I was flexible with it, because I knew that there wasn't any malice in it. And do you know, to this day, he is one of my favorite cousins. We speak every month. He has me in stitches with his stories every month. And the more that, you know, and over the years, as I've gotten to know him and his family, I kind of get where some of my own family's kind of quirks come from, because even though, you know, racially different, look completely different, there is a roan thread that's common throughout pretty much every roan that I've ever met. You know, I wouldn't have known that if he hadn't been open to the experience, and if I hadn't been open to the experience.
Well, I want to jump in because I want to piggyback on all of the stuff that you guys are saying, basically. And of course, I'm not speaking for all African Americans. I never can speak for all African Americans, but from what I've experienced, from my experiences, I've learned that there are African Americans that feel the same way as white Americans do. They're afraid. They don't want to, they're either afraid or they're angry. So when they find out that they have somebody who was enslaved in their family, then that's when they have to realize, you know, okay, am I ready to learn more about this person? Because we all know, you know, the stereotypical thing is, if someone was enslaved by a family, then more than likely they were raped by the family. And that's how we are family. And I don't want to know. That's the stereotypical thing. But reality is that sometimes you might have had a little Black girl and a little white boy who grew up together, and were friendly, and then they turned them, slavery. But that friendliness turned into a love, and they may have fallen in love with each other, honestly, because at the moment, that little baby, that little girl, or that little boy, they didn't know that they were slaves. They were just two children playing. And sadly, that's how things were going. This is how stuff was happening. And then our children grew up, and then they all of a sudden had to have a hate for each other, but some of them didn't. Some of them actually did fall in love. Some of them were raped. There were several things that were done, but because we don't have this conversation, and I'll be the one to say this, because America tends to hide what slavery is and what slavery has done.
Mhm.
That's the problem. That's the overall problem, because they hide it. They won't have this conversation. Teresa Vega came and said, this is called coming to the table. And that's what it is. We're coming to the table with open eyes, open ears, open hearts, ready to learn about what it is that we need to learn about in order to get rid of this thing called racism, in order to grow past it. And the only way we can do that is to acknowledge that slavery actually did happen in all of its horrors, because there's so many horrors that it's ridiculous. And people, and a lot of people sadly don't know about those horrors. So I think the Beyond Kim project, allowing people to upload their information anonymously, or do it so that other people can find out. I think that's an awesome idea. I think that's a great project. And I know it helped us tremendously as far as the Moses Williams project is concerned.
This idea of coming to the table, I mean, I feel like that's what happened with Francine and I. I mean, we didn't have any animosity toward each other. We were acquaintances who respected each other for years, but I couldn't say we were friends. And I didn't know that. I would have said Francine Taylor was my friend. But I didn't realize until we started to sit down to talk about this project that I didn't know her. I didn't know she was in the Peace Corps. I didn't know her husband was a graphic designer. I didn't know that she went to boarding school and she was all of these things that we became friends. We really became friends. And it was like a glass window had been between us that I never saw. And that there's this breaking of it. And I think Martine, I think you were talking about what you were talking about earlier, just reminded me of this sort of concept of white people living in a very protective bubble, so clear we don't know it's there. We see African Americans on the other side of the bubble, but we don't recognize that we aren't together, that we aren't hearing each other, that we don't know that we share a story together. And once you actually become friends together, when it changes everything, and opens a door and begins to diminish that fear. And it may be that some of these situations where you need to approach a person of the other race about your shared ancestry, it may be that it'd be a good time for us to go in pairs, a black friend, a white friend that goes with you to ease that very awkward moment where you introduce that maybe we begin to open doors for each other and make it less frightening, because fear really is the problem.
Yes,
Nope, absolutely.
So
go ahead, Tanya.
I was going to say, I'm looking at my comments, and I got everybody kind of saying different things, but nobody is really asking any questions. I have somebody named Hope Whitman who says that she says she has a story. I have a story that might be just that, but yet my white relatives have not acknowledged the possibility at all. We believe they sold my great-grandfather away rather than acknowledge him, or did worse than that. Once he was married and had a family, he mysteriously disappeared after the 1870 census, never to be seen again. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, having those stories like that and knowing that our families are just like disappearing or not being, not being counted. That's what this Beyond Kim project really helps with. It allows people who are afraid to really come out and say what's in their family line and just anonymously help without letting themselves know who they are. And
Yeah.
I don't know. My question to you, Donna, is when something like that, say someone did, upload their information anonymously, and I found somebody, one of my relatives, in that uploaded information. Is there a way for me to be in contact with that person, or how does that work?
Well, we aren't really a repository of documents, although a person could certainly attach a document to a Facebook post if they wanted to. But we encourage people to, if they have repositories, to post links. And we have a directory. And I think we've given you that link, but a link to a research directory so that you can tell people, this is the family line I'm working on, and here's where you can find our material. Since we don't own servers, we take no money for Beyond Kin, so we don't have the ability to create a repository for all this. But we definitely want to give people a pathway to all the places that stuff is stored. Those great resources in North Carolina you mentioned, we begin to help people point to where the places might be. Now, as far as whether something is anonymous, on Facebook, you would really sort of be identified as you put something up, but it is possible that somebody might have a website somewhere, have material that they're not claiming ownership for. There's really no power that we would have to have that person reveal who they are, but I do again think that anything we can do to diffuse fear as we are approaching a person is very important, because there are all these myths around about, okay, if somebody finds out that my mother descends from a slaveholder, she's going to somebody's going to try to wipe out her retirement or whatever. So there is a monetary fear even attached that we've got to be conscious of, that people are hiding things for all kind of reasons. So beginning to ease that transition between being people who keep the glass between us and people who are willing to remove it and start to learn from each other. Being willing, and we've mentioned this, being willing to make mistakes as we begin to approach each other without attacking each other on the mistakes that we're making and how we approach or words we use or whatever, because we're all terrified we're going to mess it up. But we're beginning to, but I'm not sure I answered your question, Donna. Did I?
Well, because even though they don't have a repository, based on our previous show, the International African American Museum does.
Yes.
And again, that one you can actually upload documents about enslaved people to their website. So that's certainly an option.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to quickly respond to something that Donna just said, which brings me quite nicely to a tweet. Kind of been in a little bit of a Twitter throwdown over the last couple of days. There is a senator from Mississippi. I'm not even going to say what his name is, but he's a neo-Confederate who tweeted basically a very disingenuous poll about Robert E. Lee, who I'm related to through my father. Not a direct descendant, but I'm not a direct descendant, but he's a cousin through a multitude of Virginia lines. It was a very disingenuous tweet, and considering I've been quite involved doing a lot of intensive Virginia ancestry, looking at deeds and wills and whatnot, I just tweeted to the senator that he was being very disingenuous, that he was playing fast and loose with what is a very painful family history for some people. It's painful for mine, because I know the 5 ancestors who were enslaved and I knew what their experience was. That's not me having an attack of Lee family descendants. I know a handful of them. We get on very, very well. And funnily enough, they keep saying we wish that this whole conversation would stop. We kind of wish that he was almost a ghost and people would just let his ghost rest. Yeah. If it's up to really anyone to kind of talk about him, there is a national conversation, obviously, because of the figure that he was. But that kind of there's another conversation that's perhaps more personal within the family. So I didn't want anyone to misconstrue my tweet. It was very much targeted at the senator and what he was doing, and in no way targeted to descendants or relations of the Lee family, which thankfully my cousins got. But I thought this would be a good time for Donna, for you to actually kind of talk about the Beyond Kin methodology. And Donna, sure. Do you have that graphic to queue up?
Yeah, I believe so.
And let me say, as she does that, the problem with documenting African American populations, or really any underdocumented group of people, is, first of all, you don't necessarily know who parents are, you don't know last names, and all of our genealogical software was created to have established family groupings with last names that people share. And so trying to figure out how to do some way of connecting the larger group of people around a enslaved population, enslaved institutions, group of people, or it could be also for an orphanage and groups of children who were not connected to their parents. Any of those kind of things are of value in this method. But I want to say up front that the method is a workaround, because our software simply doesn't let you do this. They don't let you tie people to people you're not legally or biologically connected to using the software. And so our hope is that as we all get on board with showing our software companies, look, we're going to document these people. Whether it's enslaved populations, or whether it's a group of soldiers that fought together in a unit, or whatever it is, that there's a group of people that you're not going to understand your ancestor until you understand that group. That we hope that the software companies are going to begin to create a more elegant solution, and we will be very happy to see the Beyond Kin methodology go away when that happens. But for now,
Yes.
being able to do it allows us to all be able to read each other's documentation and know what we're looking at by doing it in a similar fashion. But I do say all that because when you see the schematic of this, you're going to think you're seeing something complicated. And the first time anybody uses it, they're thinking it's complicated. And it is more complicated than I want it to be. But there is a reason why we've set things up the way they are. It ends up that if you pull out any piece of it, you usually end up regretting that you did. So we tell people to do this. We wanted to create a way not only to use software that already exists, but to make whatever is created transportable, so that if you're on Ancestry.com today, but tomorrow you want to be on MyHeritage or something, that you can use the GEDCOM transfer and everything moves cleanly. So we tried to use very simple and basic connections that are in virtually every genealogical software: marriages and children. So the way we created it was to connect an enslaver to the population, the enslaved population, through a couple of marriages. We marry the slaveholder to somebody, a virtual person called the enslaved population, the Beyond Kin Project, and then we marry the Beyond Kin Project to the enslaved population. Now we do this to make sure that we never want the enslaved population to appear to be the biological children or grandchildren of an enslaver. All right, if they are literally the genealogical connection to him, then you put them the regular way into genealogy software. But if they are owned by the person, you don't know that there's a genetic kinship, you need a way to connect them without making them appear to be genetically linked. So having that couple of marriages, that couple of odd marriages sticking between the enslaver and the enslaved population is how we do that. Now, another problem that you find in trying to do any kind of documentation of enslaved populations is that you're operating from a set of documents. One might be a will. One might be the 1860 slave census. But every time you find another document, the person may be named something different, or they may not be named at all. So you can't just easily say, okay, this is Sophia, and every document you find Sophia in there and connect her. So we had to create a way to tie people to the source in which you found them. All right, so we don't have the diagram up yet. So I know that it's probably even more confusing for me to say it, but I'm sorry, were you saying something? We've got
something's coming.
All right. Well, you have then the enslaver married to the Beyond Kin Project, married to the enslaved population. So you've got this this connection that's loose, all right, but a connection that if you decided to move your software somewhere else would move with it. So the enslaved population person, virtual person, becomes the holder of all of your plantation information, or your let's say that you may be documenting an ironworks that that owned slaves. You might be documenting a university that owned slaves. So that institution's connections are all going to be logged through sources. So if you've got, in my case, and there will be a link I think Donna will provide to my own family's tree that serves as the prototype for the Beyond Kin project. So you can go in there and look at how we did it. But he is married to the Beyond Kin project, who's married to his own enslaved population. So that population has children. We treat the population like a person who has children. Each child is a source. Okay, the source might be the 1860 census. The source might be my great-great-great-grandfather's will. And so every source you find that names enslaved persons becomes a child to the plantation or the ironworks or the university or whoever's holding slaves. All right, and then under the source, you create children that are the people. All right, so you name them whatever that source named them. And that way you are going to begin to have a way of comparing one source's list of people with another source's list of people and start to find ways they connect, because you find that there is only one enslaved man in the 1860 census who is a particular age, and then in the will you find only one man who is of that age, and he has a name. So you begin to then merge together people as you know who is who, and you begin to pull together a richer and richer picture of each enslaved person. Some of them you're never going to figure out who is connected to who, but you'll be amazed at how often you can once you are lining them up this way and looking at them.
I want to apologize. We are really having some technical difficulties. All the little links. So all of the stuff that Donna is talking about, if I can pull them up, I'll try to pull them up, but they will be added to the comments page. And again, I do apologize. It's just some technical difficulties happening, but I will try my best to get as much stuff in as possible.
Right. And everything I just told you, it's in a diagram with arrows. And so once you've done it a few times, it becomes easy and you start to get it. The first time you're like, this is too hard, but don't let yourself give up that first time. Martine, you've done it, so, and you as well, Brian. So tell them what you thought the first time and whether you figured out how to do it.
Do you want to go, Martine?
I thought I'm never going to be able to do this.
I think Martine might be frozen at the moment, so I'll jump in.
Okay.
I think the way that your website explains the methodology was really, really well done. But like any new skill, I was a little bit, I wouldn't say nervous, but I was a little bit self-doubting about how quickly it was going to become second nature. So the first couple of times I was doing it, it was slow going, because you have to really think about each and every step, make sure that you get each and every step correct. Because again, as you're adding these kind of fake spouses, you have to go into the edit relationship and set it to a non-biological setting. Those of you who use Ancestry will know exactly what I'm talking about. And sometimes I forgot to do that. So, obviously it was showing that they were married to this really weird spouse, called the so-and-so's 1811 will.
Yep.
But it did get a lot, it became, I'm not going to say second nature, but I became very efficient at doing it. Excuse me for one moment.
Yep.
So I've been, sorry, I'm still getting over a cold. So I'm working on an ancestor called Joseph Pleasant. He's very, very famous because in his 1760-something will, he freed all of his enslaved people. And we're talking nearly 1,000 of them.
Wow.
So that was nearly 1,000 people that I had to put into the family tree using the Beyond Kin kind of approach. And that took me 3.5 weeks. Probably, good.
I'm amazed you did it in 3.5 weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah. That was almost a full-time job.
Yeah.
But
sure.
what it allowed me to do, because I knew roughly the date, Well, the way they were freed, they weren't freed until they were at least 30 years old. Once they hit 30, then they could go. He was very good about putting what their year of birth was. Many
That's good.
instances, he actually gave the full birth date. And I would probably say about a quarter of them had last names as well. So those with last names, it
Wow.
was really easy to work with. The one name ancestors, because I knew where they were at a given point in time. I knew, and most of them were either in Henrico County in Virginia or Charles City County or Goochland. I knew exactly which plantation to go to, which census, or not even, well, yeah, the census and also the tax lists. The Virginia tax list was what actually broke that whole ancestry thing for me. I was finding family groups, the lot, and it just enabled me to really, really rapidly pick up their trail. And probably about a third of them I've traced all the way down to from 1760 whatever all the way down to 1940.
Wow.
And a lot of that was basically based on putting them all in that beyond kin format, understanding how quite a few of them were related to each other, and then
Yes.
just kind of building off of that. Because when you're looking at a list and you have 8 or 9 different Sukis, you know that there's one with the name. You know that there's an interconnection between them in some way, shape, or form. 4 of them I quickly realized was a mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter with a niece kind of thrown into the mix. But it's like, how am I going to differentiate, in the names that were used for them? And again, it's something that people have to kind of get over because it is what it is. There's Black Nellie, there's Yellow Nellie, there's there's like Old Nellie.
There's Little Tom, there's Big Tom,
Exactly.
there's Old Tom. Yeah.
And you know that there's a relationship between them. But as you start digging the records, that's how you start being able to fill those gaps and make those connections. So I wouldn't say that I'm Speedy Gonzalez at it at the moment, but I'm certainly a lot more confident.
Right.
I think it's a confidence because I've done it so many times now. I'm just much more confident and much more efficient in how I work.
You said something I really should have mentioned earlier too, the importance of doing the entire bunch of people together. Because if you're just interested in your own ancestor and you're just trying to find what you can find on them, you are going to miss so much that could have informed the story of your ancestor, because you may find that one of the other enslaved persons on the same plantation left a diary. And if you had worked on the whole plantation, you'd have found a diary that actually tells day to day what your ancestors' life was like. So you want to work on whole groups together, because you're gonna enrich everything, and you're gonna open doors that were going to be closed to you otherwise.
And Donna, the other thing that I was going to say oh, go ahead, Tanya.
There was one person that said that they were intimidated on Beyond.com. What do you mean by that? I don't know why they said that, but they said they were intimidated on Beyond.com. I'm trying to get them to respond, just to let them know that we see their question.
Okay, well, while they're answering that one, I was going to build on what Donna just said. Because again, we need to think about plantations or even small farms as self-contained communities.
Yes.
And by listing everyone that's on the various enslaving records, you're going to hopefully find siblings of your ancestor, extended family members, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. Because again, especially in my family, well, Donnie and I's family, are on the white side and the black side, cousins were marrying cousins, and cousins were marrying each other a lot for a long period of time.
Right.
So you have you have a male from an enslaving family marrying a woman from an enslaving family who were first, second, or third cousins.
Yeah.
You have her dowry slaves who may or may not already be related to his enslaved population coming together, forming their own families, which again are being split apart, but still being held within the same family. That's largely what I know. Obviously, not all descendants of African Americans will have the same experience, but largely on both my mother and my father's side of the family, the enslaving family and they knew who they were related to. That's the only way that I can put it. And if anything, those considerations, they wanted to keep those people within the overall family. So one brother might go to one son, another brother might go to another son, in terms of enslaved people going to their white relations. They may be split out that way, but they're still being held within the same overall family.
Right.
Family.
You know, I one of the first people I met as a part of Beyond Kin, or soon after, was the descendant of. I told you I knew that family had one enslaved man, the one who went to war, the Civil War, with my great great grandfather. But the first person I met that was connected to the enslaved population of the Mayberry Plantation was the descendant of that man, and what she brought, because her family, though my family left them very little in terms of records of who they were and their names, she had oral history, and she brought to the story all kind of things about that man that I would not have known, and about which enslaved woman he married on another plantation and which one he was married to on the same plantation, and things that I learned things about slavery I didn't know because she had all the stories. And I think that while the white family may have the records, the African American families may come with the stories. So beginning to connect those together is going to enrich it as well. Did we connect back? I'm sorry. I was just wondering if we got Martine back into the story. Did Martine get connected?
Can you hear me?
No, she's still.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
she may not realize that she's
yeah,
she's
okay.
frozen.
Wait a minute,
Yeah,
because she's moving on my end. Martine?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
No, I'm still here.
Can you hear her, Brian?
No, I can't hear her.
No, nobody can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you, Martine. Well, anyway,
Can you?
But I was curious about Martine's. I was curious about Martine's experience with the with trying to master the complexities of the method, because I know it wasn't a breeze. So.
It wasn't easy. I found it very difficult.
If you want to give me a little thumbs up when Martine's finished.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Right, I did. I found it very difficult, and I really wanted to give up. But being a member of the group on Facebook was great because I could write to somebody and say, help. And somebody kindly, I think, checked over what I had done and said, actually, it's okay, you know. So yeah, the first time isn't easy, but I think once you know that, you know, John was married to Mary, but he was also married to the Beyond Kin Project, if you like, and then the Beyond Kin Project is married to the will, or married to the census. I think that really does. That's it in a nutshell. Adding the children then is difficult.
It's tough. And Brian Martinez has finished. She was talking about the help she got on the Facebook page, and I would encourage anybody, you know, if it doesn't make sense, just ask. There are people there. Just as I said, it took on a life of its own. There's just this whole group of technical support people who just sort of named them. I mean, they just take over. They will help you, and nobody's paying them to do that, but they will. So.
No, that's one of the things I love about the Beyond Kin community is it really is a community. There's no side eye, there's no ish or any of that stuff. People are just genuinely really, really supportive. Yeah. I'm wondering if the person who left the comment about being intimidated was basically meaning that she found the approach intimidating, because I've never seen.
I was getting ready to say to you, they responded. They said how to set up the connection of the enslaved and also searching for information, if that makes sense. And then she said from the enslaver to the enslaved. That was something that was very intimidating to them. And that's what it was. Yeah. We don't have a lot of questions. It's actually a lot of listening that's going on, and which is great. I am so sorry that I cannot pull up. I don't know what it is, but I am posting these links. So I have posted the link to the Beyond Kin site in the comments section. I've also posted another link to the section, and now I'm getting ready to post the Facebook page. So you guys definitely need to join the Facebook page if you feel like it is something that you want to do and you want to get involved in one way or another, because Martine is a volunteer as well. So they do accept people to help out and be a part of it. Here's the link. I have been able to put it up there, but I can't, for some reason, it's not letting me show stuff.
And that's a long number. Beyondkin.org. Beyondkin.org will get you to the site, and you can get to our Facebook page and to our research directory and to instructions and to the schematic, all of it from beyondkin.org, if that's easier to remember.
So one thing that I've been doing since I discovered Beyond Kin is I've been trying to actively lobby both FamilySearch and Ancestry specifically to kind of come up with a coding solution to make this a much more streamlined, easier, and as you were saying, Donna, more exportable platform to be able to use. And my argument to them has been really simple, and I've actually invited a multitude of people who work for Ancestry and FamilySearch to watch this show. To say this is how a lot of African Americans, especially those of us who have enslaved ancestors, have to do our research. There is no other way for us to do our research. If you are spending lots of money, millions of dollars, actively marketing your Ancestry platform to African Americans, you have to support the way that we have to do our research. Just like Jewish people have certain things, records that they need to access to do their research, as do Native Americans, as do that community's just gone completely out of my head, but you get the point. Certain demographics require certain kinds of support and schematic coding to be able to do their research. This is how descendants of enslaved people have to do their research. So if you take my money every month, I really need you to make this a much more easier and streamlined process. I understand that if you're a descendant, and I appreciate if you're a descendant from an enslaver, it is jarring. And I'm thinking about people who will be my cousins on the Pleasance, Jordan, Fleming, and Crump side of the family, who will probably look at one of my pages in horror, seeing hundreds of enslaved people. But that's what I have to do to figure out which of those many groups of people are my direct ancestors, members of my extended family, and the other ones who may or may not be relations through marriage. But that's how we have to do it.
Exactly. And I hear that FamilySearch.
Can I just?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But can I just say, though, that if anybody from Ancestry or any of the other companies are listening, it's not just African American families. It's not that easy. It's all our families. I want this facility on Ancestry for me and my family. I want to be able to put in all my cousins, all my relations. I don't want to be constrained to only being able to put up my white, European, or legally married relations. I want that too. So I don't think it's just for African American people. I think it's for all of us now.
Right. I agree. We have another question up here where Barnetta White, she says, I am more than confused. I'm sure there is something on Beyond Kin that I can use, but I just can't seem to come to terms with the internet vocabulary. I've been doing this for over 30 years using original documents. I still need someone nearby to explain to me all that is shown on Ancestry, 23andMe, etc.
And Barnetta has been active on our page for a long time, and I thank you so much for coming in today. And I know that one thing we need to do is to create some sort of online tutorial, a video tutorial, and I really want to do that, and I hope I can make the time to do that. If somebody else can do it, if I don't have the time, I would love to see that happen, because I do think for some people, just watching it being done could be a lot easier than trying to read how to do it. And so that is one thing we definitely need to do. And Barnetta, I don't know where you are, but I would love to be able to actually come to a place where I can talk to a group. I know that I think I'm going to be coming to Atlanta at some point. I don't know if you're near there, but just being in a room, going through a PowerPoint presentation and being able to ask the questions could be helpful. But we do need some better methods of explaining it. So.
Yeah.
I'm probably not the best person to do it because I've slightly adapted the Beyond Kin project because I know that a lot of, specifically my Virginia and South Carolinian white enslavers, are biologically related to their enslaved people. So I've actually removed one of those two-step distancing. So there's still a degree of separation between them. And it's really weird because, again, my main tree is on Ancestry, and it's still really strange that I can still set a record, whether it's a will or an estate inventory or whatever it is, or a deed, as a friend or other, something that's non-biological, and then list all the enslaved people as either foster children or stepkids or some distinction that clearly should denote that they are not biologically related. Ancestry still says that they're biological. You look at the description, and it still says child.
It does, and if you have made two people foster children under the same parent, which would mean generally that they weren't necessarily biologically related. But if you try to marry them, which they might very well have been married, then Ancestry is going to block it. But and I have notified them of that as a problem. I have a workaround, and that's another thing we do on the site. When we hit on problems that the software creates like that, then we find a workaround and we share it together. So there's a way to work around that. But I know, Brian, I think you had a pretty complex coding system already designed. Did you not? Am I remembering right that you were coding your ancestors in a way that helped you to keep them organized?
A lot of time, I try to illustrate their kind of journey, their enslavement journey through the same family, down the generations. So one, on a person's individual, on their timeline, I will make notes. You can actually do those custom events. I create a custom event for each record that their name appears in. So I can chronologically follow them. Make a note of who their original enslaver was, who they went to in the next document, who they went to after that, where they were, the date, all of that kind of stuff. So anyone landing on their page can get that little short story that way.
Right.
But as they're going down the generations, I will create a duplicate for them under the next enslaver. Put a little, especially if it's a one-name ancestor, which most of them are going to be. I'll put like Andrew asterisk. I'll go back to the original Andrew, and I'll actually merge the two of them.
Right.
Well,
don't we long for the day that none of the coding and complex stuff is needed? And I think it will happen. The more of us who are getting on board with doing it the hard way, that tells the software companies, the first one of you who does this is going to start getting the business. So, we can have the power of the critical mass one day soon, I hope.
Brennan responded back, and she said, how do I determine who the common ancestor is? And that she's from North Carolina, of course.
In terms of my visiting at some point, I would love to come there. I would love to move there, Barnett. How about that? Okay, so determining a common ancestor. Well, the Beyond Kin project is designed, it's not necessarily looking for biological connection to the slaveholder technically. That's not what we originally designed it for, though it's going to happen. With DNA, you're going to begin to have connection to, you're going to be able to begin to see biological connection. But our goal with the Beyond Kin project was to actually document that population that's around, that encompasses a slaveholding institution, whether or not they are biologically related to each other. So we really don't have anything new and different in terms of figuring out genetically connected ancestors, except doing what we're being counseled with everyone else, doing DNA and matching that with documents. But I will say that if you've done the work with the Beyond Kin project method, or if you have another method that works, of getting all of the details together so that you can find everything you can know about each enslaved person, beginning to mine what's available from multiple records, beginning to compare and contrast them. So you start to have more and more about them. You might know that they were on 3 plantations and what order they were there and things like that. But you match that with DNA, and then you begin to have a much better shot at figuring out who was biologically connected to who.
Yeah, so I would probably just flip it just a little bit to say, for me, the way that I view it is Beyond Kin is about laying down the foundation of the paper trail to be able to research the family. Now, that's going from the past to the present, going back from the kind of oldest known enslaved ancestor, going back further in time, again, trying to pick up their trail through the paper trail. But if you know that you share DNA with descendants of that enslaving family, that paper trail should start to narrow your focus down about who the biological ancestor may be. And then it comes down to reaching out to descendants of that family and triangulating DNA. But that's a different process to Beyond Kin.
Yes, and you know, I mentioned that the enslaved man that went to war with my ancestor, that his descendant had found me, and she and I mean, she had been fairly confident that when she found me, she was going to find the genetic connection, that she felt like she descended from my ancestor, and my DNA unfortunately ruled that out. But it at least eliminated a wrong path, so it helped her to move in another direction. So being able to find each other by way of the paper trail, and then to use DNA to refine the next steps.
We got another question from Deborah Cross, and she said, while listening, I'm exploring the Beyond Kin site and I'm looking through the slaveholders list, but so far don't see any of my names, Mims, Boom, Holder, Tut, etc. Do you have information for slaveholders who had small numbers of people, like 1 to 35 enslaved people? My ancestors do not seem to have been big time enslavers.
Right. If she was looking, Deborah, if you were looking in the directory, the research directory, people are populating that over time. So you keep coming back, because a person that's working on your family names may show up in time. So keep an eye out there, and put yourself in there as a researcher on those names, so that people looking will find you. All right. But then you could also come onto our Facebook page, tell people who you're looking for, and see if anything comes up. The more of us that amass around this, the more likely you are to find somebody, but it may not happen immediately.
And Martine, considering I've spent so much time saying what a wonderful community the Beyond Kin community is, if you'd like to talk about how, just about the engagement aspect, the kind of volunteer and the member engagement that you do.
Okay, so people are coming from all walks of life, and some people come in kind of in shock because they've just discovered a slaveholder in their ancestry. Other people are coming in like me. Well, we know there must be a slaveholder because we're getting these, either a paper trail or DNA matches. Some people are coming in from a kind of a social justice sort of a thing. Other people have, I suppose, a spiritual faith or something that's kind of leading them in this direction. So we're coming from a whole load of different perspectives. But I think what we all share in common is the knowledge that this is the right time, that this is something that we can all contribute to. Some people are fabulous researchers when they come in the door. Other people, like me, are learning as we're on the go. No piece of information, no matter how small, is useless. Every piece of information matters. And so we have some people, like Barnetta, who is, has massive experience in research. And as I say, other people like me who are just a couple of years down the road. But everybody who has even one name matters. Even if it's just one name, it matters. So, and people are helpful. Well, Donna and Francine, they set the tone for the group, very warm and welcoming and encouraging too. And our group isn't, or at least it's not my experience anyway, it's not like hierarchical. You know, we're all in this together and we're trying to make a difference for whatever reason. And yeah, so it's a good place to be. It's a really good place to be.
It's good to have you there, Martina.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, we are knocking on the 5:30 time period. Normally our show goes for an hour, but we knew this was going to be a little bit longer because it was a lot of information that needed to be, gotten out. I am, for one, continuing to watch the Beyond Kim project because I haven't found any of my family names in there as of yet, but utilizing the methodology is just great. And so is there any last minute things or any other anything that we haven't covered outside of the fact that we can't show the stuff because of it's a technical difficulty? But is there anything that you want to say, Donna, to people? Because I've already placed the Facebook link up there as far as joining. And is there anything else?
I just want to, Martine, her face represents to me why this is working, and because she's just become a leader. Nobody said, Martine, we want you to lead. She just leads, and others do the same. Mrs. Abbott, who is watching, her expertise in this is helpful. She's always there to help on the research side, as is Francine. And I just welcome anybody who wants to be a part. Don't worry if you feel like you don't know how to do it yet, or if you don't feel like you're contributing. Just watch until you're ready to step in and do what you want to do to make this the critical mass we need to make this really roll into something huge.
Okay, Brian, do you have anything you need to say?
Apart from thanking our two marvelous guests for joining us today, no.
Thanks both of you. Thanks both of you for letting us become.
You guys are great. Martine, it's always wonderful talking with you, especially given the fact that we are family, and that's just awesome.
Family.
Donna, we're gonna have to check and see where our connection is, because I'm quite sure.
Well, hey, you mentioned Robert E. Lee, and I think I'm connected to him too, so we're gonna find it.
Yeah,
we're gonna find it.
Pretty much match everything and everywhere.
Yeah.
So, Brian is my highest matching cousin. I think we crossed paths like 7 different times on 7 different lines. So
that's just South Carolina. That's even before we even get back into Virginia.
I'm glad you've done all my work for me when we actually do find a group.
Right. And there was one lady who made a comment up here. She was like, Brian, you have Holloways in your family. I do too. Yes. Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Holloways. A lot of Holloways in our family.
Actually, if you go to the Genealogy Adventures website, you will find a lot of blog posts, a lot of articles about various Holloways and my Holloway research.
Yes. So we have people saying thank you, everyone, that they're appreciative of the show. Lots of comments, over 80 comments, 81 now. And, it's always growing. You guys, we love the fact that you have followed us. I want you to know, just straight off the back, from our first show to our last show, this final show, we have watched our numbers grow. And right now we are touching on the 10,000s because of you guys. And it's all because of y'all. So thank you so much. Continue to share our genealogy site. Share our genealogy YouTube page, because people can watch the videos while we take a little hiatus for the month of September. We will be back, though. We will be back. And we will be back in October. And we're going to start off strong, just like we're ending strong. We're going to start off strong. We're starting off with the Georgetown University 272 Descendant Project. For those that don't know what that is, basically, Back in 1838, Georgetown sold 272 of their enslaved people in order to save the school. And now we're going to be talking with Karen Bertram. Karen Harper Royal.
Royal.
Yeah, Karen Harper Royal, and who is one of the directors in that area as far as the Georgetown project is concerned, and she's going to share some information. Edgefield family, you're going to want to watch that because there are several of our family surnames that connect to the Georgetown project. I am actually a descendant of one of them by Queen, but I have no idea how. So this is going to be a perfect time for people to come in, ask the questions that they need to ask. Another show that we're going to be doing is actually speaking with the director from the Daughters of the American Revolution. And we're going to, learn more about that and what it is that they actually do and how people can, join them and what kind of information they may need in order to join to find your overall patriot. So we have a lot coming up in October, and, we're really looking forward to these next few shows, but we're also looking forward to this break. So I'm really glad that I signed up with Brian with this. I'm glad that I found him. I love Brian like I grew up with him. You guys may not know this, but Brian and I have only known each other for about 5 or 6 years. But you can't, because I swear, he's like my right arm, and I think I'm his left. So we have really gone through some stuff with our families.
We are the dynamic duo. Whenever I have a genealogical, funny, shock, horror, whatever it is, Donnie is always my first port of call.
Yeah.
What's my famous? Usually, my line with you is, "You are not going to believe what I've just found today."
Or he'll come with the, "Are you sitting down?" And I'm like, "Oh God." That's what we do, but it's really awesome, and I'm so proud to be a part of this project. We are still moving forward with our other projects, so keep a listen, keep a lookout. Follow the Genealogy Adventures page, follow the Beyond Kin page, follow the Sheila Hightower Allen DNA page, project page, because it's all growing and everything is in one way or another is going to meld and mesh together. So I'm Donna. Thank you again, guys. Thank you so much.
I'm Brian. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you to the audience for again sharing your Sunday with us. Love the journey.
Yes, we'll talk to you guys in October.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Now, what do I do?